Ladies and gentlemen, today is January 26, 2016, and this is the KNKL Show, episode 279, where we learn to be better artists. My name is Keenan Lafferty, and I would like to welcome you to a tutorial on creating and using photo effects properly. And we're going to be jumping back into our good old nuclear girl, and I'm super happy because this piece is finally done. And and this is part 3 of the series, so if you want to go back and see how we got to this point, then go ahead and click on the picture right now. It'll take you back a week, and you can see how we got to this point. But more importantly, I'm going to be showing you guys how we get from this point to this point, okay? And I know that might be a little bit jarring to go from this to this, right? And you're like, oh, whoa, it's like so amazing. At least that's what I was saying. I was actually really proud of this piece. But yeah, we're going to be dissecting exactly what goes into taking a picture from this point where it's like, oh, because I remember last week I was looking at this and I was like, this is nice. Like, I like this a lot. But then looking at this, it's like, whoa, it's like so much more polish and like subtle effects that are added to it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, because I get a lot of questions about people asking, okay, so I can get a picture to a certain point and then I just don't know how to finish it. How do I add those final touches? How do I add those cool Instagrammy photo effects and balance my picture out and like put stuff like noise, see up in this right by me, the noise in the top side of this picture. See if you take this away, like little tiny things like that, balancing, contrasting, and the ever infamous chromatic aberration, which we're going to get into as well. But before we get into that, we need to take a stroll down the lovely lane, people, because you guys have been submitting your beautiful artwork. And let's go ahead and get the scrolling started. So if you'd like to go see all of these for yourself, take a look at the URL right here, tinyurl/KNKL fanart. Go check out the page, like the Facebook, submit your own art, get featured on the show. That could be you right there, scrolling past. And yeah, most importantly, come get some cookies. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, with all that out of the way, we do have a time lapse. So let's go ahead and get into that. Let's get into that right now. And then I will pause it. As you guys know, that's the way that we usually do things. I'll pause it at certain points where I feel like I need to describe something. But for the most part, it's time to just kick back, right? We had a good weekend. And now we're back. And now it's time to just kick our feet up, have a little bit of entertainment before we get into the actual education. And you can see me here working in real time, of course, as always. This is how fast I actually work. And we're just continuing from where we left off last week. Okay, so one of the things, probably the biggest challenge that I was having here was figuring out how I was going to kind of like treat the edges here, because I did this thing where I painted the lines out, and for some reason it just kind of took away like that feeling that I wanted. Like, even though you're technically not supposed to have lines on the outside of your body, I like the feeling of still including those dark edges on the side of the character. So I ended up putting those back in on the final piece, as you will see when we go back to it later. But mostly right now what I'm doing is just trying to refine everything, and polish things. And a lot of people ask, well, Keenan, what the heck does that mean? What does it mean to polish a drawing? And the most important thing that I can tell you guys is the difference between a drawing being polished and unpolished is really just going to be the clarity and the sharpness of your edges. Okay, so for example, do you see how like in this area right over here, like see how the edges of this gun, you can still see all those little like tiny imperfections of the brush strokes, and even in this sleeve. Whereas like right here on the edge of this glove, see how clean that edge is right there? Clean the edge is going up to that thumb there. That's really what I tend to think about in terms of like polishing things up. Really defining your materials on the inside of your shapes, but more importantly, like rendering the edges of your shapes. Rendering the edges where two materials are coming together, or just two objects coming together. All right. So let's go ahead and move into the overpainting stage, like the next overpainting stage. I know we did the animation cell and then we did the overpainting last week, but now we're going to be doing overpainting again. So what I'm doing here is I'm really starting to take the materials to their final level. I'm really trying to get in there and say, okay, what is going to make this jacket look like it's like a canvas cloth? And how am I going to make these shorts look like, you know, they're properly, you know, because right now it looks nice. Like the phrase in the shorts look nice in terms of shapes, but they don't look like realistic fraying jeans, you know. So I wanted to get in there and really start to define that, really pull out those details. And I want you guys to keep in mind what I just said about the edge refinement, right? Because that's probably the biggest thing that you're going to be seeing me do here, is I'm going to be just refining the edges and adding in new values. That's another thing that I'm doing here. Okay, so another thing that really helps is that as you move into like the later stages of your drawing, you might say, okay, well, these values are looking pretty good, but there's just not enough contrast in this character. I want to put some more darks in here. I want to put some more shadows in. And for that, I'm relying on, check out the layers right here. We got a multiply right there, multiply, and shadows, right? And for my color, you can see over here, I'm using like this dark brown. And this is just a nice overall kind of shadowy color to put on the skin specifically because it has like that brown kind of reddish in it. For other things like the clothes, I think I switch it over to like a bluish or like a dark purple. That works really nice. But what this allows me to do is begin controlling my values, And what that means is that basically, like, let's take a look at this before. So do you see how bright these shorts are and how bright these legs are? Like in terms of just how bright they are on the page, that's called a value, right? And ideally what we want to do, in fact, this is a good place to pause it. Let's go back to this. This is a good place to pause it and talk about this, talk about values. Okay, so let's take a look at this in terms of black and white. Values have to do with black and whites. Okay, so if we turn this layer on, we can see now we have a black and white version of our picture, right? And let's go ahead and do the same thing with this. Okay, so I want you to pay attention closely to these legs. Pay close attention to the legs and the values on those shorts. So if we switch back and forth, do you see what I've done here? I've actually knocked those values back down. I've darkened them and I've lowered the contrast that's happening down here. And the reason why I've done that, let's go ahead and pull out a layer, is because I do in fact know how to control your mind. I do know how to control your mind and the minds of my viewers to get them to look at what I want them to look at. And this is called focal points. So basically, where the viewer is going to look first on your drawing is always going to be the areas of the greatest contrast, So you have nice darks in here, contrasting with the lightness of the skin and this really bright hair standing out against the background. I like this. It looks like a cool little like French cap there. Really, that's hot. I like it. In fact, I think I'll keep it like that as an improvement. But then down here, we see that there's a lot of, it's just like one gray shape. It just becomes more of one gray shape. And this really comes to the forefront if you squint your eyes. It's called the squint test, right? So, but versus this, see how there's a lot of really bright things sticking out at us in this version, right? We've got the contrast happening here, but then also we have contrast happening here and here. And of course, even though Nuclear World does have sexy legs, I don't want you guys looking there at the very beginning. It's more something that I want you guys to look at, as you are, just looking at the entire piece. You kind of your eyes wander around the piece, and then you can take a look at that later. But it's most important that when you do your focal points, you want to be able to pull that attention up. Pull it up, especially to the face. That's the most important place that you want people to look in your drawings. I mean, especially if it's a character drawing like this. So that's why, going back to the time-lapse, that's why I was laying in those multiply layers to really just kind of get a greater control over my values and see if I can do that thing where I kind of pull your attention more up towards the face and the torso area. All right, so once I was happy with that, I added some more dark values in there. It also is a really nice way to kind of change the values, like see how I made this entire jacket darker as well. Before, it was a little bit too bright for me. It was too bright. There's too much it just looked kind of weird. I wanted to put some more shadows, especially in like the ambient occlusion areas. And that's a fancy way of saying like where two objects are close to each other and they kind of create shadow, for one another. They create shade for one another and make a little picnic underneath the tree. It's really awesome. That's ambient occlusion. And I've called it something, I've called it so many different things before, but yeah, it's just whenever two things come together, there's a shadow there. So that's ambient occlusion. So, and just shadows in general. See, because like the shadows, the cast shadows from these pockets going down on the legs. And I'm going in and I'm doing everything on overpainting now. We're not working behind the lines at all anymore. You guys should already know that. We're just working in the forefront. Okay, and you can see me here just like kind of playing around with how much I want those lines on the edge of, say, like the hip there to show, on the edges of the pants to show and all that stuff. And then I go in there again. See, now I'm really laying in some more multiply layers to really just kind of bring that attention up more towards the face area. And I'm switching on and off. If you see it flickering, that's me like checking to see if it's indeed working to my dastardly plan, to mind control you and make you look where I want you to look. All right, so then along the way, I was like, hey, you know what every good picture needs? It needs some smoke in there. It needs some atmosphere. So I figured that would also be another great tool to use to help obscure, not only create some more texture in the background, but also to obscure the legs in the foreground. Because see how it looks kind of strange in its current state? When it goes back there. You can see the legs are just kind of sitting there in front of the fog. And you'd think that you know, some of that fog or some of that smoke would be kind of in front of the actual legs there. So I end up going back in and putting that in. And again, that also helps to put less contrast down there. So again, you're not looking down at the bottom of the piece first. You're looking right where I want you to at the very beginning. And that's values, ladies and gentlemen. We use it all the time at Riot, and we still do. It's all about it. And in fact, I urge you, and I would recommend that you take a look at all the splash arts for your favorite games, not just League of Legends, but any sort of promotional art. You'll notice that a lot of the artists will do this. They work with focal points. They use contrast to draw your eye to the most important places first, and then they use low contrast and usually like darker shapes, or it's not even like darker or shadowy places, just like less contrast in terms of like black and white to create more distant things or more obscured details in the piece. And it's really awesome. Okay, but I got way ahead of myself. Oh shoot, we're moving into the skin. Shoot. Okay. So, all right, so we're gonna begin putting on the dirt and the sweat, which is really awesome. This is my favorite part of the piece. This is finally the point where I was like, okay, finally, like it's looking the way that I want it to look. And it's amazing how much, in fact, I'll pause it throughout here and I'll show you guys the actual differences that each of these make. And I want you guys to see what I'm actually doing here. I'm not repainting a lot of the face. Rather, what I'm doing is I'm going in there and I'm putting in some very small hot highlights. Very, very small, just tiny little details of little pores that are catching the light, right, and kind of reflecting it back at you. But overall, there's not much that I'm really doing here. Just tiny, tiny little adjustments. And it's actually very amazing. Like, once you guys start doing this type of stuff and you start painting faces and really studying skin, you'll be amazed how the smallest little changes can affect so much in terms of the face and in terms of your materials in general. But mostly in the skin. I really find it really shows up a lot in the skin. So I was really happy about that. But look at this. Look at this. The boob is the perfect example, okay? So look at this. Before, you had... okay, did we go too far? Shoot. Okay, there we go. Perfect example. And this point, I will pause it. Okay, so see right there, all I did was I put that little highlight on there. And that's it. That's literally all I did. And look at how much that actually changed the feel of the like the wetness of that area. But let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that. Pause the thing and let's look at that. Okay, so we gotta close this down and let's go ahead and zoom back out so you guys can actually see what I'm doing. Okay, so let's talk about that. So let's zoom in on all this good stuff. Let's take away the dirt. Let's just take away this OP stuff first. Okay, so see, look at this. Look at the differences specifically in the face. It's really just adding those last little highlights. Little tiny highlights in a very few specific areas. And remember what I was talking about last week, guys. The places where the hottest speculars are going to be is where those planes of the face are facing directly at you, right? So see how like this part of the forehead would be facing directly at you. This part of the nose facing directly at you. And yeah, same thing. And again, it shows up best right here in the chest where we've got the sphere, and the part of the sphere that's facing directly at you gets the light. So it's awesome because we got that easy front ambient light. Makes everything super, super easy. It's a walk in the park. I love it so much. And yeah, so that's all we did there. That's those little OPs. So you can turn those on and off. And if you're curious about taking a look at this for yourself, don't worry. It'll be on the Patreon later. All right, so let's go ahead and get back into that good old time lapse. All right, continuing. So I was really happy with how the dirt went on. I totally was an idiot and I didn't record that part of the dirt. So I can explain that really quickly as well as soon as this is done. In fact, I'm gonna write that down so that way I don't forget about that. Let's explain the dirt. I'll explain how to do some dirt effects. And it's actually really cool ideas and yeah, very, very fun. Very, very fun things to do for dirt. Okay, so the last things I'm doing here is I'm going in and I'm adding all those tiny little details, little tiny scratches in the armor, little tiny little frays in the jacket here. That was actually one of my favorite parts, was like putting all the little tiny details in the jacket and really having it get to that final point where I was like, yes, this is what I wanted. Because before it was like, I just feel like the materials aren't coming through so clearly, and I was a little bit confused about like what actual style I wanted to do with this, because at first it was like, oh well, it's a take on, you know, my old anime girl, Nuclear Girl, so it should still be semi-cartoony. But then I was like, I kind of want to make this like really realistic too. Like I feel like the more time I spend on something, the more I keep pushing it towards like more realism. So, and I like to find that cool balance of like doing realistic textures and realistic materials on top of more kind of like mixing it with that anime feel, kind of an anime influence in the style of the face and just in general, like with the lines on the edges of the body. I love that type of stuff. So, and I hope you guys like it too. The gun. The gun was so much fun. I was really happy about this part because I darkened down those values. Let's go ahead and switch back here really quick. So a cool thing about the gun, let's go ahead and put that value layer back on. And take a look at this. So if you look at our old one, so do you see how the darkness of the skin right here makes the gun sort of begin to blend in? It makes it start to blend in with the rest of the torso. But here, what we did was we actually brought the gun back out. We put some lighter values in the actual body of the gun, and we were able to kind of pull it out. So we pushed the body back with values, and then we pulled the gun forward. And I really liked that happened. And it was sort of by accident, but I do everything on purpose. It was totally calculated, and I'm a professional. So of course I knew what I was doing, right? But I thought, oh, well, isn't that interesting? So I was able to actually push that part of the body back and then bring the gun forward just by using those value tricks and using those multiply layers. Alrighty, moving on. We got a little bit more left of this time lapse. We got this one and then just like a 30-second long one of me doing the photo effects. And then we'll move into the actual deconstruction. And I'll talk to you guys about those photo effects. We talked about values, and then most importantly, dirt. We got to get that dirt on there. Got to get that dirt on Nuclear Girl. All right. So, yeah, by this point, I'm just like, yes, this is finally what I wanted, finally where I was looking to get. I know I've said that like a million times already, but I'm actually really, really happy with this piece. Really proud of this piece. But there was one more thing that was missing. I was like, she needs like one more thing. I wasn't sure if it was like dog tags or like something with a necklace or like a little thing. Oh, I totally skipped the skipped the part of the time lapse, but I just put like a little nuclear patch on there, courtesy of my girlfriend. That was totally her idea. Stole it, and it was awesome. And so yeah, that's why the picture looks as amazing as it does. In fact, I'm honored to have worked on a piece that my girlfriend, it was basically her entire idea. But anyway, so here I am putting on all those photo effects, and don't worry, I'm going to explain how we did all that in just a moment. As well as the noise. Noise is really cool, and it's a fun thing to do. But again, it can be abused, and it can be used wrong, and if you use it wrong, then it looks really bad. It looks really nasty. All right, so we are done with all that good old time-lapse. And let's not take away the camera. Let's just zoom out. Okay, good. All right, guys, so let's jump into this. And I know where you guys want to go first. We're going to go to those good old photo effects. Let's talk about those photo effects and what they actually do. What do they actually do? So let's take away this, and let's go ahead and just flip this on and off so you guys can see what's happening here. So at first glance, you'll say, okay, well, the picture is getting brighter. There's a little bit of contrast, a little bit of color unification happening. You might ask, well, how am I doing that? It looks a little bit more Instagram-y, basically, is the way to say it. And you say, well, Keenan, how the heck do I do that? Well, let's open up this secret folder. And see what I did here. All right, so the first thing that I did was actually I used a gradient map. So you might ask, what the heck is a gradient map? It's this thing. It's this thing that if you, let me take it all the way to full opacity. Basically, if you take it all the way to full opacity, it looks like this. And the way that you create a gradient map is, let me show you guys how to do it. Let me go ahead and take it off and I'll do a new one. So it's a very easy way to create a gradient map. I've shown you guys this in the past, but just in case, you go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then you do Gradient Map, and then hit OK. And then I'm pretty sure with Photoshop, this comes along, like there's a bunch of preset ones, and then you got this blue and orange one. And I use this one like 90% of the time, just to let you guys know. I use this all the time because it looks so good. And basically what this is doing is it's saying, okay, we're going to take your picture and all the dark parts of the picture, we're going to turn them blue. And all the light parts of it, we're going to turn them orange. And then here's where the cool part comes in. And that is in your layer styles, right? See, right now, we're on normal. If I can get this out. Right now, we're on normal. And if you choose something like darken, you get a completely different effect. And then you can just use your arrow keys to kind of like click down them, and then you can get a bunch of different effects. But what I've found works the best in terms of really like balancing your colors is lighten and screen. Screen and all those other ones. This one, color dodge, works cool too. All these are going to give you different kinds of effects. And then you can choose, again, if you guys are familiar with Instagram, it's exactly like the Instagram app. You just go over to your opacity and you can lower the opacity to see how much you want it to affect your piece. So I would urge you guys, that's the first thing that I would say, is use those gradient maps. Use those gradient maps and see what kinds of cool things you can come up with. And just because I said that you had to choose that default one that's like blue and orange, doesn't mean you have to use that one. You can also click this thing right here, click that gradient thing right there, and that'll pull this tool back up, click that gradient there, and you can choose different colors. Like say you wanted like a blue in there, and check out how the blue affects the piece. Say you want to choose a red, see how the red affects the piece, you know? And you can do that with both the shadows and the lights. And that is the beginning of gradient maps, ladies and gentlemen. So that's the first thing I did, okay? So we've got that gradient map on there. I lowered mine down to about, I think like 10%. Oh, what was it at? Oh crap, whoops. Oh, I hit the, I hit the freaking hotkey. Wrong hotkey. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. Where was it? Back here. Ah! Okay, yeah, mine's down at 10%. Then I also added in a brightness contrast layer, right? Just to kind of like bring things back up. Bring things back up to a pleasant, just a pleasant look for me. Pleasant look in terms of darks and lights. And then we did a very special thing, and that is called a noise layer, ladies and gentlemen. A noise layer. So if we look at this noise layer, what is actually happening here, let's go ahead and turn this thing all the way up. So the noise layer basically looks like this. And you might notice that there's some areas where I have erased it out with this mask down here. I have masked the layer and I have pulled parts of the picture back out. And the reason why I've done this is because it's very important to not have noise all over the place. Like watch this, if we disable this and then we knock it back down to where it was, like around, well, I mean, even if it's like 8%, 10%, you know, that's good. But if you look in here, like you can still see like a lot of the noise looks really strange once it starts like blending into your character's face and like body and stuff. You don't want to have too much. And heaven forbid you go above like 10%, because once you start getting to like 20%, it really starts to obscure your picture and it looks really nasty. But anyway, okay, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We need to talk about how we even make the noise layer. We need to talk about how we even make the dang thing. So let's do that. All right, guys, so here's how you do it. So you're gonna create a new layer over top of everything. Create a new layer, and then I want you to choose this nice neutral gray and then fill the entire canvas with it. And I have it hotkeyed, but you can also do edit fill, okay? Edit fill. Then what you're gonna do is go to noise, filter noise, and then you're going to do add noise. There we go. Okay, cool. So you go ahead and add that noise. But then, if you'll notice, because we're working with such a high resolution picture, it literally makes every one of the pixels different. It makes them all really small. And I like my noise layers to be, like the noise dots, to be kind of big, to be rather big. So what I like to do is I will take this noise layer and I'll expand it out like that. And you can do this to your heart's content. So it just makes the dots a little bit bigger. Okay, so now you have some really nice noise here. I also, personal preference, I like to lower the saturation just a little bit so that way it's not quite as like jarring on my face. So let's go ahead and do that. And then what you're going to do is set it to screen. You can try a bunch of other different things, but screen works pretty dang well. And then you just go ahead and lower that opacity. Lower that opacity down so that way, specifically in the edges of your drawings and in the dark areas, you get this really cool texture happening, right? And down here, see that cool texture that's happening? We love that. We like it. We like it. And I'd say around 10 to 5%. You don't want to go above 10% because then it's going to start looking really weird. But then the most important point to make today is that you want to make sure that you mask it, okay? And that is going to be right down here, this magical mask. Oh, don't go too far, otherwise you open your taskbar. Click that mask thing. And then the way that masks work, I'm sure you guys are familiar with masks, but just in case, choose black. And wherever you paint black on this mask, it's going to make your noise disappear. It's going to make it disappear. See how we can kind of clear it out, clear that noise out of that dust, that crap, get that out of there. And we want to remove it specifically from a little bit too much in the face, looks weird, a little bit too much. Anywhere there's like skin or just like I don't know, just like things that are supposed to appear closer to you, I've noticed. Like if things are further in the background, it looks really nice to have noise on it. Like our background here, obviously, that looks nice to have noise on it. But things that are closer to you, like say this gun and like this part of the hand and stuff like that, and dark areas. Actually, dark areas, it looks better if you take away some of that noise. And again, you don't have to take it all away, but just make it a little more subtle. A little more subtle. Do that to your heart's content. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. You got some noise on your picture. It's not overbearing. It's not going to make blisters on your viewers' eyes. And we love that stuff. Okay, now the final thing that I didn't use in this piece, but you can use it. Again, I'm very cautious about teaching you guys this because this is sort of like the dark side of art. This is the dark side. This is the trendy chromatic aberration. Okay, so this is how you do it. It's super easy. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is, the first thing I did was I stamped everything that was visible. And that's done with Shift-Control-Alt-E. Shift-Control-Alt-E basically makes a flat version of our piece. Okay, it's all flat, all one thing. Okay, now you're going to double-click basically this blank area to go into your blending options. And then you'll be presented with this amazing thing, Channels RGB. Interesting, I wonder what that could be, right? Let's go ahead and let's click off B and G. And then we just have R. We only have the red channel. And then we're going to take that layer, and we're going to move it. Oh, look at that. Oh my gosh, we are an amazing Instagram artist. All it took was that chromatic aberration. It's ready to submit. It's ready to go, right? Don't do this. Do not do this, okay? The key with chromatic aberration is that you want it to be subtle. Okay, so I would highly recommend that you use your arrow keys and just slightly kind of bump it over to the side if you're going to do this at all. Okay, and you want to zoom in and you can see what's happening here. It's kind of taking those edges and it's just putting a little bit of red and green on it. But similar to what we learned with the noise layer, you're also going to want to mask it. So we're going to place a mask on top of this. And then we're going to paint black in the areas where we don't want that to show up. And I found that the best thing to do with this is to have it not show up in like the middle part of the piece, the middle of your character. It looks really nice to have those lines and those colors on the edges. It looks really nice to have those lines and colors on the edges of your character. Like this, it's really subtle, but see like that little green that's happening there? I can turn it on and off and you can see what's happening there. See that? That looks really nice, but you don't want to have too much on the inside. This stuff in here, like see where the hair is? That looks like crap. Get that out of here. Get that crap out of here. And then you'll be on your way to being an amazing Instagram artist with your chromatic aberration. All right, I can't believe I just taught you guys that, but I mean, everybody's got to try it once. Everybody's got to try it once, and at least I taught you how to do it properly. Okay, last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get that out of here. Again, I didn't use chromatic aberration in this piece. I didn't feel like it needed it. But the most important part is, of course, our dirt, because we skipped over that, and that... How selfish of me. How selfish of me to keep my secrets of putting dirt on beautiful skin a complete secret. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. So the dirt consists of a few different layers. And of course, our layers are here and here. Okay, wait, is there another one? Okay, so the dirt just consists of a bunch of different layers, and it's just a bunch of different brushes that I have. And if you guys are curious about downloading my brushes, you can get them all on DeviantArt. And at least the most important one. There's a couple in here that are custom that I bought that I'm obviously not allowed to give away. But the most important one that is available is this clouds one. Clouds. And this is how you're going to create dirt on your character. So let's go ahead and take off this dirt. Let's take off this dirt and let's do it all over again. So let's create a new layer. And we're going to take our cloud brush, which looks like this. Looks like this when you paint with it. And we like that. That's a nice color. Nice texture. Nice texture. And then we're going to choose our dirt color. Okay, so let's kind of go with this dark brown. But then before you begin painting with it, before you start laying this stuff down, what I'm going to ask that you do is you go into look at the top left up here. You're going to click this button. This is your brush settings. And then there's a setting in here. There's a checkbox called wet edges. Now if you choose that, it all of a sudden, like you can see what it does to the actual brush there, changes the behavior of it. And this creates a much more realistic looking dirt effect. So let's go ahead and lay that on the skin. Let's begin laying that in different parts of the skin. Like this. I mean, you can get a little crazy with it. I mean, it's like really random, so you got to kind of tame it to your to your needs, right? So lay some of that in there, right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to go in and you're going to erase out, right? Because this is just on the skin right now. This is the way I like to lay all my textures on, is I'll go back in and I'll erase it away from the places that I don't want it. Very, very simple. Very, very simple. And then in this area, right, where it needs to be darker, we can lock that layer. We can lock that layer, and we can go in manually and paint it darker. We can lock the layer and go, whoops. Not erase the layer, paint the layer. There we go. We can paint it darker there if we so desire, you know? So that's basically how I started laying in my dirt. And you just do that with a bunch of different types of brushes, suit it to your needs, and then there you go. You got dirt on the skin. And again, it's all about that subtlety. It's more so about subtlety. And there's like these little scratches and stuff in there. I also would lay those in. Let me show you how I do that. I just take that same color that I was using, and I would use something like the chalk brush, right? I would lay something like that in, and I would like put little kind of scratches in there, and then just erase it out. Erase it out. And actually, wait a minute. Was I using these? Yeah, these were all on normal layers. Interesting. I guess I was wondering why it looks a little bit better here. Oh, I know why. Okay, I'm sorry. I totally messed this up. I totally screwed this up. So I was actually working with a much darker color here. It was more like this. And then what I did was I reduced the opacity on it. That's how I created a more realistic looking dirt effect, right? So don't be afraid to work with a darker color here to put that texture on. Get that texture in there. And then go ahead and go in and you can kind of erase stuff out. Kind of get those edges to your liking. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, with all that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and end today's show. Did I talk about everything? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Alrighty, so thank you guys so much for joining me live on, well, not live, but on YouTube. Thumbs up if you like it. Thumbs down if you don't. I feel like this one went kind of long today, but, you know, whatever. It's all good. Most importantly, before we go, I do need to say thank you to my amazing sponsors. Laura Bashir, David Chiariello, and of course, Captain B. But with the creepy looking eyes, but I still like him, because I made him. I mean, well, he designed him, but it's his thing, all that good stuff. Okay, sponsors of the past. Also, my amazing sponsors of the past, thank you guys so much for supporting the show, and everybody on Patreon. And speaking of Patreon, before we go, if you would like to get today's PSD, then just go ahead and click on this picture today, or click on this picture right here. Why am I having such a hard time talking today? Click on this picture right here if you want to go to Patreon. You can dissect all the layers of mystery for yourself, see it up close and personal, and of course, yeah, get all that good stuff. So yeah, click there if you want to go support the show, and yeah, I think that's going to be it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to go ahead and end it. So I will see you guys next week. And until then, you guys use those photo effects properly. Use them properly because I've shown you how to do it. I don't want to see any more crazy chromatic aberration that makes my eyeballs bleed when I look at it. You guys learn how to do that. Use the noise. Use it responsibly. I've given you guys a lot of power today. So you guys take care, and I'll see you guys next week. See ya.